Inflation. It's a tricky old game, and it's certainly something that a lot of people are worried about. But gold and silver actually might be pretty useless to fight inflation. That might sound strange. It's often called the way that you beat inflation. But right now, we're in this really weird period of intermediary inflation. It's not disastrous yet, and just hoarding all of this stuff for the short term is going to get you in trouble. So let's talk about inflation and why gold and silver have their place, but aren't the silver bullet. Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and welcome to another precious metal ramble. Now I want to talk about inflation. It's a pretty hot topic within gold and silver stacking communities. For rightly so reasons. You know, we are seeing huge increases in inflation, the cost of living, and it's causing a lot of concern for a lot of people, myself included, about where we will be in the future financially as a nation, as a country, as a society, and of course my own personal circumstances. Now traditionally, gold and silver have been a great way to perhaps hedge your bets and preserve that wealth through troubled times of inflation like this. But actually, in my opinion, a lot of the stuff that you might buy for the short term, because we're seeing it so often now in the headlines, it's actually probably a really bad purchase if it's just for the short term. What it's really good at is that long-term protection. That's the key here, long-term. But what about hyperinflation? We've seen examples from different countries around the world where inflation, like we're seeing right now, has then gone to go out of control. And Venezuela and Zimbabwe are two prime examples of that. So I want to share some of my thoughts and opinions on gold and silver as it relates to that, where we are in terms of whether that's even likely to happen or not, and just generally what might be right for me and my circumstances. It's important to remind you all of that. This is just a ramble about my own personal views and opinions. It's not financial advice. And I'd love to know what you think down in the comment section below. So please feel free to comment as we go throughout this video. It's why I make it. And I know that a lot of new and seasoned stackers get a lot of insights from the kind of things that we talk about in these videos and in the comments. Now, inflation, it's a hot topic right now, and it's certainly causing a lot of people a lot of worry. But there's a difference between the kind of inflation that we're seeing right now and the kind of inflation that perhaps people are really scared of, which is the hyperinflation like we saw in Venezuela or in Zimbabwe. Now, gold and silver are going to be absolutely next to useless when it comes to a supreme hyperinflation scenario. If what happened in Venezuela happens to the US dollar or the pound or the euro, complete collapse, we're talking absolute to zero, you know, week by week it exponentially goes, then the gold and silver that you have will be okay. But to be quite frank, the gold and silver will be not as useful as things like medicine, as food, water, toilet paper. Goodness me, we saw what toilet paper futures were looking like at the start of the pandemic. If there was a complete collapse of the US dollar or the pound, you know, society is going to be in some serious trouble. And again, I made a point in a big video I did about Venezuela that if you have gold and silver, yes, you can go and trade it in and you can buy whatever you might need on that day, but it's only going to protect you and your wealth for that day. You know, you're going to cash out and get the bread because your loaf of bread will cost whatever the new dollar is. It'll cost, you know, $400 a loaf of bread or whatever it is. It's impractical. It's not that useful. Certainly if the dollar completely collapses, we're going to be looking at absolute carnage in terms of hardship and rioting. You know, there'll be complete collapse of society in those circumstances. So to kid yourselves that you'll be able to just pop down to the grocery store and buy stuff with gold and silver on an everyday basis is not that likely. However, of course, keeping it for the long term, keeping it through that crisis is where things pick up on the other side. And we've seen that in exact examples from cases in Venezuela where people have been using and holding gold and silver to get their wealth transported through time. That's the inflation beating mechanism that gold and silver are best at. Now, the kind of inflation that we're seeing right now, where we're hearing these huge numbers that are coming out, 9%, you know, 10% even for some calculations. These are, in my opinion, they're relatively transitory. And I know everybody hates that phrase, and I could be wrong. There could be, I mean, I don't think that the entire figure of 10% is transitory, but I think that things will get better in time. It's just about when things will get better and how long it will take to get there. And for a lot of people, if you're buying gold and silver right now to protect your wealth, you really need to be thinking about the real long term of it rather than just a short term. If you think that in a year's time we'll all be back to happy as Larry, hunky-dory, you'll be quite shocked to see that gold and silver will have gone down quite considerably. However, if you are looking to perhaps save some money for the next 5 years because you want to look to buy a house maybe, then having an asset right now instead of cash is actually going to be quite useful. So it's going to come down to everybody's individual circumstances about what's right and what can't be achieved with inflation busting gold and silver. And I think it's really, really important to consider all of the options in front of you before making those financial decisions. If you are of the mindset that prepping is important, then yeah, having other things right now is, I think, really important. And I have never described myself as a prepper, never described myself as somebody who would need to have, dry stored food in the house and long-term supplies. But after the pandemic, when shops closed down and things just weren't, you couldn't get toilet paper for love nor money, you couldn't get anything that you perhaps would need to get you through a week. That I can see happening if the dollar's collapsing. But will the dollar even collapse? I mean, that's a video topic for a whole other time, and certainly I wouldn't be able to do any kind of justice to it now. A lot of people think that it might and it will. Personally, I've been hearing that story since I turned sort of 18. I went on a jolly to Seattle in the northwest of America, and it was a wonderful place. Love it, absolutely fantastic. Went round youth hosteling, and I saw so many different people. And I remember a few different people there talking about how the dollar was about to collapse. And at the time, I thought they were complete. This is my opinion at the time. I thought they were completely crazy. I thought, well, there's absolutely no chance that it will happen. Nowadays, I'm a little bit more skeptical, a little bit more pessimistic about the world. But complete collapse of the US dollar, I think, is not something that we're likely to see. It could happen, but it's not likely to happen. And I think it's really important that a lot of people out there understand that. Panic, fear of missing out, it's really, really, really dangerous. And as I've sort of said, it can be quite bad to look to sell things over a short term for silver, especially right now. With premiums being where they are for silver, gold, on the other hand, is your friend. If you can and you are concerned about inflation right now, the simple best thing to buy, hands down, will be gold. Now, again, it's going to be very difficult to know what's happening in the very short term. So make sure, of course, you've got your sort of reserve funds, your contingency funds. Make sure you've got enough money to pay the mortgage, the bills, everything that you might need, or even the increased bills. We're seeing an energy price cap here in the UK in October, I believe, and I think that's going to go up quite a lot again, and we're going to see the cost of living again increase for a lot of people. So difficult times ahead for sure. Gold and silver are great to have, but they're really not the problem solver for inflation. Inflation is a very difficult beast to really comprehend where it's going to go. We're seeing interest rates rise from various different central banks across the world, and that's a real surefire way to control inflation. How well it will do that is another question in its entirety. But one thing that we know for sure is that this modern world that we're in, where people are borrowing and borrowing and borrowing to do anything and everything, and certainly in post-pandemic world, there are so many people out there in this world that are just simply spending money that they don't have. And whether it's because, you feel like, I know a lot of people feel like that if they take out a lot of debt right now, when the dollar collapses, it will mean nothing. I mean, yeah, if you borrow £5,000 now and then in, 10 years or 5 years, even a year's time, the dollar's collapsed and it's worth nothing, then yeah, your quid's in, but that's not likely to happen. It's not likely to happen. And we're seeing historic lows of borrowing costs ending with interest rates going up. So it's going to be quite telling how things evolve over the next coming weeks and years. And a lot of people are saying as well that interest rates are unsustainable because of the high debt that's on all of the huge numbers that we're seeing for national debts. But don't forget that inflation's actually quite good for national debts. Again, it's that same premise as if you took out that $5,000 or £5,000 loan and it inflates up. It's not as much to pay back, all things considered. And the same is said for big national debts of countries around the world, including the US and the UK. So 9% inflation might sound horrible, but it's not as bad as a lot of people think. But it is bad, and it is something to worry about. And I know I worry about it into the future. It's difficult to really know where things are going to go. And for that reason, I buy silver and gold. So to round this video out, silver and gold will be, I think, next to useless if the dollar or the pound collapses, because quite frankly, it'll be World War III. There'll be just complete chaos around the world. If the dollar completely goes to zero, 350 million people in the US will just disappear. In my opinion, it's going to be civil war, rioting, worse. It's going to be horrible. And of course, so many people will suffer. If, however, we continue to see these kind of rates of inflation continue to grow, it's just going to make life obscenely harder. Obscenely, that's a new word. Obscenely harder for a lot of ordinary people, which is just awful. We're just going to have to see how it goes. And I know for me, protecting my wealth, my family with this stuff is a good idea, but it's also worth noting that it's a longer term goal. So now, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this subject. So please feel free to comment down below and I'll get back to you if it's an interesting, fun discussion. Otherwise, that's it from me. Remember to thumbs up if you've enjoyed this video and hit subscribe if you've not already done so, like nearly 70% of all the views on our channel. We're closing in on 40,000 subs as well, so if you're a BYB Rambler and you watch to the end, tell your friends and family to come and hit subscribe, because when we get to 40,000, we're going to do a giveaway. That's it from me. We'll see you on the next one. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.